Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookishram and we are on day 3 of Vlogmas. So today we are here to cover the song Frosty the Snowman, which I think everybody's pretty familiar with. Good old Frosty. That song has been done so many different times, so many different adaptations, but because I was thinking Frosty, and there's always adaptations with kids in mind, and I believe there's kids even mentioned in this song, I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about some of my favorite children's books. So when I say children, I mean from the age of 0 to about 4th grade, but that's not really an age, but age range of pre-schooling and to 4th grade is what I categorize as children. So this is not going to include any middle grade books. This is only going to focus on children's, and I have about 6 books that I quickly want to go over. But of course, as always, like with all of our videos, let's talk a little bit about Frosty the Snowman first. So Frosty the Snowman was written by Walter Jack Rawlings and Steve Nelson and was recorded first by Gene Autry and the Cass County Boys, which I have never heard of any of these individuals. So finding this out and doing my research was very, very interesting. The song first came out in 1950, and Frosty the Snowman was adapted into a book and a 3-minute movie adaptation following the release of the song. What I found really interesting in my research about this song is that Frosty the Snowman originally had nothing to do with Christmas. It was just genuinely a winter related song, and I'm so interested in that fact because we associate Frosty the Snowman automatically with Christmas, and that's not why he was initially developed. So really fun facts about Frosty the Snowman. Alright y'all, so let's go ahead and jump into the book. So the first one that I have on this list is by one of my favorite children's authors. I've read so many of this author's works, and this is probably a fan favorite. I think a lot of people have heard of this. The illustrations were done by Brian Selznick, and it is Friendo by Andrew Clements. So Friendo is about a little boy by the name of Nick who decides that after he figured out where words come from, that he can call anything. So the word Friendo basically comes from the fact that he decides that a pen doesn't have to be called a pen. It can be called a friendo, and eventually the word catches on amongst everybody, and of course you have school administration and other people who are upset about it. So it's funny, it's really short, it shows the power of words, and I think that Brian Selznick's illustrations just add a beautiful touch to the entire story. The next one that I have is Ferris of All by Sarah Milanowski, and this is actually a representation of this entire series because I remember when I first listened to one of these books, and it was a few years ago, and the narrator does a wonderful job, but I thought that these were so cool because they're reimaginings of fairy tales that we're used to seeing, but they always work in favor of the princess in the story, and it's very much so about girl power, and I love that, and that they are actually rewriting these stories so that the princesses are actually more independent and they're not dependent upon princes to come and save them. And I love that Sarah Milanowski decided to do something along those lines. And the series is actually called the Whatever After series. And I believe they're up to 10 books now. And I've read probably like the first 4 or 5. I actually need to go back and do a serious reread because I just enjoy them. And they're not anything that's like a complete deep dive. They cover those topics, but it's not so overbearing, especially since it's written for a younger audience. But they're extremely accessible, they're fun to read, they're easy to read, and I just love the message that it sends out. So the next one that I have on here is Steph Soto, Taco Queen, and this was written by Jennifer Torres, and this is about a young girl who does not like the fact that her family runs a food truck, and she really genuinely just wants them to stop running the food truck, and eventually that is a possibility and their livelihood is threatened. And I think I really enjoyed this one. It wasn't what I was expecting. This was definitely a coming of age story. It was one that really was about what you were willing to do for your family, especially when your family was in trouble. And I was very surprised about how much Steph was willing to do for her family. It was amazing to kind of see that and watch her development from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. But this is really a good, diverse middle grade book, and it's been a while since I've read this one. I remember reading it a few years ago, but it's definitely a good story, and one that I think a lot of kids would enjoy reading about, especially in looking at familial relationships and dynamics and how our families sometimes can be embarrassing, but they really have, for the most part, our best interests at hand. And sometimes our family, they just do what they have to do in order to make it and support their family members and survive. The next one that I have on this list is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, and I included this one on this list because Charlotte's Web was very pivotal to my reading experience, so I could not include it on this list. It was actually Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little, which both were read to me by my dad, and they are just an intricate part of why I am the reader I am today. But everyone knows the story of Charlotte's Web. I actually had to, funny enough, I had to reread that book for graduate school when I was taking a children's lit class. But of course, Charlotte's Web is about our famous pig by the name of Wilbur, who is on this farm, and you know, he pairs up with Charlotte in order to help him live and survive and not be cooked for bacon. And this is probably one of the most heartbreaking children's books that you would read. It talks a lot about family and death and friendship and compassion and understanding, and there's just a lot of different components to it. I think the real star of this book for me has never been Wilbur. It's always been Charlotte, and how much she is willing to do in order to help a friend, and making the ultimate sacrifice, I think, is what's so important about this book, and not so much about just Wilbur and Wilbur's need to survive. Charlotte really is the driving force behind a lot of this book, and I have a family member who is actually named after one of Charlotte's babies. I don't know if you all have seen the original adaptation, the cartoon adaptation, the old one, where one of the spiders says that their name is Aranias, and I have a family member that was named after that spider, which is a very interesting story, but definitely a children's classic that I enjoy, and one that I could not include on this list because of the fact that it has played a very integral role in my reading experience. So one that has become a newer favorite for me is Solway by Lupita Nyong'o, and this is illustrated by Vashti Harrison. I talked about this a little bit in my November book haul, and this is one that baby girl and I have read together. I actually read this to her when she was younger. It didn't really understand what a book was and couldn't even hold herself up to sit up to look at the pictures. But this is one that is definitely important when we're talking about colorism and race relations, and how even within the confines of a specific racial group, there are still issues when it comes to how darker skinned individuals are treated. And this is a prime example of a little girl who has trouble accepting the fact that she has darker skin and that she's different from the rest of her family, and she heartbreakingly goes through the phases of trying to get rid of her dark skin because she's not happy, and having to go through that journey of learning to love herself and to love her skin. It is a phenomenal picture book. I think that Vashti Harrison is one of the best picture book illustrators out there to date. If you've never seen Vashti Harrison's work, here goes just a little taste of it. Absolutely gorgeous and beautiful artwork, and I'm excited that we now have a copy of this in our household, and this is one that we will continuously read over and over again, and this is one that I felt the need to include on this list. And the last one that I'm going to include on this list is The True Story of the Three Little Pigs by John Skaska. I can never say his last name, and Lane Smith. and this one is hilarious. So everyone knows the story of the three little pigs, but what John does in so many of the picture books that he has done is flip that story on its head and give us a revised and remixed story in which he identifies it as the true story. The artwork is so different, but different in a good way, and it really adds to the overall essence of the story. And essentially what we're getting with this story is, for once, we are getting the perspective of the big bad wolf and how he ended up in such a tight spot where he was essentially harassing and threatening to eat these pigs. And he explains why he was put into these situations, and that the story that people often tell is not the story that is true, and they are missing details and vital information as to why things happened the way that they did. If you have not read this picture book, even as an adult, if you have not read this picture book, please pick it up, y'all. It is hilarious. It is a classic. It is timeless. It is one that I would recommend you read over and over and over again because it's just that daggone good. Alright, y'all, so those are a few children books that I would recommend that you check out. Those are some ones that I have enjoyed that work well with the song of Frosty the Snowman. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit that bell for notification. If you're looking for ways to support my channel, the links will be down in the description box below. If you're looking for ways to follow me on social media, the links will be down below. As always, as I've said in the videos before, I won't be back with a video soon. I'll be back with a video tomorrow because it's Vlogmas.